what are the best tips for you to adjust your body composition, right, in a shorter amount of time to get to the weight, the feel, the look, the size and clothes that you want as fast as possible, sustainably. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bucket everything into three places, all right? We're gonna look at activity, so overall activity, right, that's gonna be number one. Number two is going to be food and drink intake, okay? And then number three is going to be strength training. Okay, and if we're talking about just body composition shifts, outside of any contraindications for injuries or post-surgery or anything like that, or any pre-existing medical conditions, autoimmune or otherwise, this is really just general recommendations for the buckets that we're looking at to improve body composition with or without a coach. So let's dive into it. Overall activity, this is going to be how much you're moving day over day. Now, this is going to include your times in the gym, times doing cardio, times doing team sports, your step count, how much you're sitting, right? And your overall activity has a lot to do with how you're going to progress. Okay, let me give you a specific example from one of my clients. I have a couple clients that do CrossFit. Okay, they do CrossFit 3 to 4 times a week. Totally cool, not knocking it. Is it good? Is it bad? Whatever. They do CrossFit. But what they do is they go from having a very high volume day of Olympic weightlifting, doing squat cleans or doing squat snatches or doing hip thrusts or jerks of some type, and then gymnastics on top of that. They go from very, very high volume of hinging movements into then sitting in the day, right? And the problem with this is that overall activity is directly correlated with body composition change because it controls, one, how much we're moving, but then number two, you know, what does the time outside of the time that we're strength training or in the gym look like, right? And so overall activity for me, I really try to pocket, the literature says anywhere between 8 to 15,000 steps a day. I think the easiest way for us to have better composition faster is by just controlling the amount of steps that you're getting in. Okay, it's low-hanging fruit. It just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of pre-planning. Most of us sit way too often, right? We sit on our butts at home. We get out of the gym, we take a shower, we don't stretch, we don't mobilize, we sit down. Okay, sitting down further exacerbates our hips being tight, right? Iliopsoas, our hip flexors, right? Our quads being tight, our knees being immobile, right? Our ankles being a problem. And so we want to make sure that we do is that our overall activity is up. We're not just gym heroes and then we sit around and watch TV and sit in front of the computer all day. Now, a lot of people work from home. There is ways to get steps in, i.e., one of the biggest ways to get steps in is going to be to look at something like getting steps in on the top of the hour or at the beginning of the day, or spending time before you start work or after work is over to get steps in. I mean, really, somewhere between 8 and 15,000 steps a day is going to be what we're shooting for. I know 10 is touted as the number that everyone needs. Not really the case, right? We don't have to have 10, right? That's not the case there, but somewhere between 8 to 15 will be the most optimal because it also gives us more movement, more activity, which allows us to burn more calories, right, without having to take more time for recovery. Because the last thing that we want to do is get so much overall activity in that then we have to recover 3 or 4 times as much. You know, you do fitness to live, you don't live to do fitness. Unless you're a professional athlete or you're a coach or what have you, different story, but I'm not talking to those people right now. And then number two, we're talking about overall food and drink intake. And this kind of comes down to, right, a couple places that we want to look at. And, you know, I think that liquid calories, our protein, right, and then our carb intake, right, could be things that we want to look at here. And the reason why I say this is we're going to bucket those into, well, actually, above all of this, right, what supersedes all of this is whole foods. Okay, whole foods. And we're really talking about caloric intake, okay? So caloric intake is the amount of calories that you intake on a day-to-day basis week-to-week basis, month-to-month basis. It's what's going to control our inflow, is going to control a lot of the times how fast we're going to be moving on body composition changes for a few reasons. First and foremost, most of us don't eat too many whole foods, right? We could be eating more on the outside of the aisles from the grocery store than on the inside, so less ultra processed. And I'm defining ultra processed as, everything in the grocery store is processed, like let's not play, but something that's packed with tons of refined sugar, lacks fiber, right? Is like four derivatives past the actual food itself. Now, is anything that's fortified with vitamins necessarily bad? It's not really a good bad, a yes, no, a black, white, a 1, 0. It's to what end is it processed, and do we have nutritional value in there? Because there's a lot of foods on the inside of the aisles of the grocery store that are far more calorically dense, so more calories, more energy you can get from them, but nutrient scarce, okay? And so I'll do another video on that, but overall, we're looking at overall caloric intake, right? From more whole foods than not, right? And I don't mean the whole foods, the grocery store, but whole food sources. Then secondarily, really us looking at, it's going to be intake is 1, right? Whole intake is 1, right? Protein is 2, whole food is 3, or these are interchangeable, 4, 5. So overall, we're looking at caloric intake, right? Figure out how many calories you actually need to move forward. Secondarily, we're looking at the amount of protein that you're taking in. If we're trying to get body composition change, what we need to make sure that we're doing is get ample protein for muscle building. 40 grams of protein for muscle building when you're doing strength training 2 to 3 times a week, 40 grams a day is not going to cut it for what you're trying to do to have body composition change to a way that you're going to take up less space. Maybe the weight's going to be the same, but you're in a position where clothes fit better, right? There's less rollover at the waist. There's less rollover out of spaghetti straps, out of shirts, what have you. Like if you're trying to improve your body composition, right, from a strictly scientific basis, we're going to try to lower adiposity, lower our body fat percentage, and increase our muscle mass, our lean skeletal mass. And so that's going to look like maybe weighing the same, but being smaller within our clothes. Now, I'm not assigning a moral judgment or an ethical value to being smaller or taking up less space or what have you. I'm not saying that. But if you are somebody that wants to improve your composition, right, that has carryover to other medical things, right, having more muscle mass over the long run allows your bone density to be higher, allows you to usually be more mobile at higher ages, right, also allows for you to rebound from things a little bit easier, and it's easier to not put on weight, put on fat, right, unnecessarily or unwanted fat. So what we're looking at is we got to have our caloric intake overall where it needs to be, right? Our protein, I'm not going to give you a protein specific recommendation, but what we like to do and what I try to do is I just try to eat my current body weight in protein per grams per day. So I weigh 230, I try to get between 200 and 230. That's a lot of protein for a lot of people. And I'm not saying that you need to do that. I am saying that you want to be in a position where you are getting more protein and getting closer to a number that you can consistently try to hit. And for women, typically what I'm looking at is between 100 to 150 for someone that's doing strength training that has muscle building and composition goals and is coming from a deficit where protein is not eating a ton right now, and they want to change their composition, right? That is where I'm looking at for most women that come to me for coaching. And on the men's side, if you're 6 foot, you're anywhere from 150 to 250 pounds, and you're trying to lose fat and build muscle, I will probably pocket you somewhere between 150 and 200, and we'll just use that as a jumping off point. It's not medical advice. It's not the start of where you have to be. It's just where we like to go. I've seen best results there for us. So after we talk about overall caloric intake and protein there, looking at whole foods, eating more on the outside of the aisles than the inside, right? A very hard thing to do if you haven't thought about it, but a very easy shift to make once you know why we're trying to do that, because we're trying to have nutrient-dense food, but not ridiculously calorically dense food. So a bag of chips might be 240 calories, but the nutrients that you get out of there is not synonymous with, perhaps something like an avocado, right, that is nutrient dense and calorically dense, or something that is nutrient dense like red meat, but not as calorically dense as a bag of chips, okay? So we want to be very intentional about that. Number 4, most people, they overconsume in their liquid cows, right? They overconsume in their liquid cows, and this can be in sauces, seasonings, and and so does alcohol, etc. You know, alcohol itself is not going to slap fat onto you. Alcohol by itself, like alcohol is not going to be stored as fat. I know that that's something that people like to talk about, but what it will do is it will aggressively change how your body is processing what it's being fed, right? So, and I don't mean that on a like, oh, if you touch alcohol, you're not going to be able to lose weight. Like, that's not true either. You're not going to be able to build muscle, but it impacts a lot of things that have carryover. So it impacts your sleep, it impacts your focus, it impacts, you know, it impacts your mental health, right? A lot of activities that go hand in hand with drinking high volume of alcohol also are not net beneficial in the long run to your health and wellness. So something to keep in mind that we watch that. And also most serving sizes for liquids, right? Liquid sauces and seasonings is a tablespoon or a teaspoon or multiple teaspoons or maybe 1 or 2 tablespoons. And most people take it by the ounce. And that's completely different than the recommended dosage on the bottles, but we don't pay attention to that. And so it's easy to have what I call ghost calories, which is stuff that we're doing on a consistent basis that we don't think adds negatively to what we're doing, to what we're trying to do, and oftentimes is the reason that we're not seeing the success that we want to see because we're just not aware of it. So want to be intentional about that. And then, outside of the liquid calories, we're talking about carb intake, right? We're talking about intentional carb intake. Carbs are not bad. Carbs will not make you fat. I like to be intentional about more higher glycemic index, so more sugar, less fiber, fruits prior to, or carb sources prior to working out. So you have a little bit more energy, you can push, right? You have that little pop of energy without having to douse yourself in caffeine. Definitely want to look at that. And then carb intake overall. Carbs, a lot of times, right, if we're having stuff like rice, if we're having grains and we're having legumes, like you'll get full. So what I want you to be aware of is that you should be intaking carbs as long as you don't have any contraindications digestionally that would stop you, that would prevent you from doing that. But we want to be intentional about timing of those. They're best served in and around the majority of your fitness, okay? They're best served there, in my opinion, they are. Now, you might have different reasons why you want to eat more carbs at different times. Honestly, they taste good, right? A lot of times, but just be intentional because again, they're a serving size, maybe a cup of something. And most of our servings in America, we're looking at like 3 to 5 cups at a time. So we want to just be intentional about that. Shouldn't be afraid of them. Shouldn't fear monger them. It is what it is. And then the last thing here is the strength training. The number one carryover to your composition change is going to be how much lean muscle mass can we put on to your body to help you with changing your metabolism, right, for the good. And then secondarily, how much more muscle can we put on, right, that will allow you to burn fat faster. Now, is it, hey, if you get 1 pound of muscle, you're going to burn fat, this formulaic approach to da-da-da. Like, look, we just want to be intentionally progressively overloading, meaning session over session, week over week, movement over movement. We want to be increasing the amount of load that we're using against our body in a safe manner to the best of our ability there. That doesn't mean that you need to jump 20 pounds of lift every week. You don't need to do that. You just need to go maybe 5 to 10 pounds heavier week over week if possible. And on the days where you can't do that, cool, just pick up at that weight the next time that you come in there. It's not a big deal. But strength training is going to be the biggest carryover to make it a little bit easier to lose fat, right, and change the composition. So we've got overall activity, which I think is the easiest way to do that is steps. We've got our food and drink intake. I go like overall caloric intake and then a protein target and then more of my carbs throughout the day around my workouts. And then number 3, just strength training. Now, you don't have to do functional bodybuilding or CrossFit or what have you. What you want to make sure that you're doing though is more strength-based training with longer rest periods in between moving heavier weights. If you don't have access to weights, you can go kettlebell dumbbell. If you don't have access to that, you can go body weight. Anything is going to be greater than nothing, right? So 1 is always bigger than 0. If you don't have anything but your body, move that ass. And check out one of our other videos, or one of my other videos talking about different movement patterns and different planes that you can move in and how you can do it on the road, in a hotel gym, or in an Airbnb, or just calisthenics-wise with your body. You can get great workouts like that. Now, you're not going to look like Arnold doing calisthenics workouts. It's just almost impossible to do. But you can have a very shredded physique and a different body type that is more leaning in towards lower body fat percentage and higher percentage of muscle. That can absolutely be a thing. You can be very lean and just be doing calisthenics. You don't have to move heavy ass weights to do anything like that. But I would say that it is a little bit easier if you're using heavier weights to make that composition shift in the beginning. It's a little bit easier to do. But again, consult a physician, talk to a coach, figure out what's going to work for you, your schedule, and what have you. Overall, though, we just want to be paying attention to these things, and we should be good to go. Hope that helps. Peace.